We are 1 month away from the NBA trade deadline, and I can't figure out how the Jazz can get anything done between now and then. We'll look at it next on Locked on Jazz. Bum 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 pow.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked on Podcast Network. Your team every day.
How are you? I am David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz. It's your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, give you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. Thank you so much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen. We are free and available on all podcasting apps, as well as on YouTube, Amazon Fire. Glad to have you aboard. Thank you very much for being part of the program. We also have the daily newsletter now at lockedondaily.com. Yesterday, you would have gotten the exclusive Empty in the Noggin from the weekend, plus Katie Heindl's national article, plus Josh Lloyd. Go subscribe now for the ultimate one-stop newsletter. All right, here's the plan today on the program. We are going to look at the NBA trade deadline and try to figure out what deals the Jazz could make and what the market is and what's available and how some of the salary structure items that exist now are impacting things. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. New customers bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Win or lose, visit FanDuel.com to get started. We're going to do it this way. So we're going to look at first who the Jazz have, second what the market has, so how do the Jazz players compare, and third we're then going to go through the rosters of as many teams as we think are buyers on the market. I'm assuming the Jazz aren't a buyer, but frankly, with Justin Zanuck and Danny Ainge at the helm, there's always a chance we're a buyer. Like if the opportunity arises, in theory, we could be a buyer. But we're going to go through most of this with the idea that we're probably trying to shed talent, gain assets, improve draft position. That would be the goal we head into the trade deadline. Now, if a player becomes available that we think is a long-term answer and changes who we are dramatically, we can discuss that as a possibility. Let me start with who do the Jazz have? So, actually, anyone on the roster is tradable, okay, other than Lowry. He's actually, by league rules, not tradable. But I think if we have to be honest about it, like, we could trade Keontae tomorrow. We could trade Bryce tomorrow. We could trade Cody tomorrow. Like, if the right deal comes up, there's no reason not to if the right deal's available. They're not Victor Wembanyama. The only player in the NBA that's not tradable is Victor Wembanyama. With that said, the likelihood, and you can just do this not based on their performance, but based on their years in the league and their salaries. The likelihood is the Jazz most likely to be traded are John Collins, who's making $26.5 million. I think Collin Sexton, though, that's a very interesting discussion, at $18.3 million with next year $19.2. So 2 years left on his deal this year and next year. By the way, John Collins is a player option next year for $26.5. I'm assuming he'll opt out. But I don't know. Clarkson's at $14 million and $14.3 for next year and out for at least 2 weeks with plantar fasciitis. And then Drew Eubanks at $5 million and Svi Mykhailiuk at $3.5. And then we have contract fillers that we could do things with, but I actually think the most likely to be moved is Drew Eubanks or Svi Mykhailiuk, where some team doesn't like their fifth player in a rotation or their third string center. And both those guys have been so good that someone's like, yeah, we'll take that guy as our security. Exactly what Boston did last year when Svi was on the championship team. Okay. So those are the players the Jazz have. And just to elaborate on Collin Sexton for a second, it's just an interesting name that keeps popping up. One, he's just continues to play so well. I think he can really help people. He's also 26. So if we're saying he's not on the timeline of us being good one day, then nor is Lowry, which is, I guess, a discussion. And so it's an interesting, like, I think for Collin, you've got to get real value. Again, and I don't know that can happen. The number one takeaway I'm going to have for you today is I don't know how the Jazz are getting deals done. There's not 4 or 5. Like, what ends up happening here in this circumstance is you better have 3 or 4 different avenues where you can, or 5 avenues where you can get a deal done. Because some of those people are going to take another turn, and then you're not going to have a deal. And so you better have another. I can't find that many routes for the Jazz. And so I think it's going to be an incredibly difficult trade market for the Utah Jazz to be able to get anything done here. And I'll try to show that to you here. I mean, I am going to be, if the Jazz end up with anything beyond second-round draft picks, I'm going to be impressed by the work of the front office. Collin Sexton might garner a late first from someone. And it'll be a steal for whoever gets Collin Sexton. He's really good, and he can really score. And when it gets down to it in the playoffs and everyone's switching 1 through 5, if you have Collin Sexton on the floor and he can get to the basket and he can score, he could win you a playoff game. So I think Collin Sexton has pretty fabulous value for someone. So maybe the Jazz can go get a first-round draft pick. And let's remember that first-round draft pick likely will be 11 and beyond, and that's only a 50% chance for a rotation player. So that's a good deal by the other team. All right. The players that are available on the market. So in other words, what's important here is these are the players who the Utah Jazz front office, like if deal packages get put together, and you're going to see in a minute, we'll run through, next thing we're going to do after this, we're going to run through the teams and what they have available to trade. And there's just not that many teams that can make trades. So that if one of these players I'm about to mention goes somewhere and takes a team or two off the market gets even slimmer for the Utah Jazz. The new collective bargaining agreement has negated minimized the amount of teams that are actually can make deals. And so if De'Aaron Fox gets moved or Malcolm Brogdon gets moved to someone, and that was one of your potential avenues or trade partners, there aren't that many more. You're not working with 29 other teams right now. Phoenix is kind of almost impossible to get a deal done. Denver, it's going to be almost impossible for them to get a deal done. Cleveland, Boston, Oklahoma City, I don't think they want to get deals done. Knicks, I don't think they can get much of a deal done. So there's a bunch of teams that either don't want to because they're so good or can't. Here are the guards. Zach LaVine, $43 million available, supposedly. De'Aaron Fox, $34 million. CJ McCollum, I heard that from Jake Madison of Locked On Pelicans yesterday, $33 million. Anthony Simons, sorry, that says Simmons. Makes you think it's Ben Simmons, and it's Anthony Simons if you're watching on YouTube. Anthony Simons, Portland, $26 million. Malcolm Brogdon, Washington, $23 million. Bruce Brown, Toronto, $23 million. Collin Sexton, 18. Jordan Clarkson, 14. For guards. Now, honestly, if I'm an opposing team and I look at this list, Collin Sexton looks pretty appealing to me. You're going to get the takeaway from the end of this show that it seems like to me it's going to be very difficult for the Jazz to get much of any deal done. But if it's going to be something, Collin Sexton seems to be the most appealing piece of any puzzle, with considering his salary, considering the other players that position, and considering the fact that what he can do and bring to your team. And then the Jazz have to decide if they 26-year-old scorer who can really put it in the hole and is playing great and is a super energy guy and a fabulous kid, whether you're getting enough value removing him. What is enough value is an entirely other conversation for another show at another time. Here are the wing players. Jimmy Butler, $48 million. Brandon Ingram, $36 million. John Collins is not really a wing, but I didn't know where to put John Collins. I kind of sums it up. $27 million. Jeremy Grant, $25 million. Cam Johnson, $23 million. Kyle Kuzma, $23 million. These guys are also competing with like, you may decide Cam Johnson is better than Collin Sexton. You might decide you want Kyle Kuzma because he's longer than Collin Sexton. You might want Jeremy Grant. You're not really playing Collin Sexton as a point guard, so he's playing a 2. Well, maybe you'd rather have Jeremy Grant or Cam Johnson or Kyle Kuzma at 23. Ingram at 36, Butler at 48. And the centers, DeAndre Ayton at 34, John Collins at 27, though he's not really a center. Vucevic at 20, Nurkic at 18, Valanciunas at 14, and Kelly Olynyk at 12. Obviously, there can be some surprises. Bradley Beal can let his trade thing go. This was just, maybe there's probably a name here I forgot. But that's the basic set of pieces that are out there. These are guys that are really openly kind of out and available, and people are talking about them. And that's 21 players. There aren't 21 teams making trades. A lot of these players are going to be left without a team. So let's look next at who's available, who's got players that they can move, who's got the salaries to match. Trying to find a salary to match for John Collins, crazy difficult. Next on Locked On Jazz. Tuesday edition of Locked On Jazz is brought to you by our friends over at Murdoch Hyundai. Always such a pleasure to talk about Murdoch Hyundai. Why? Because Blake and the crew make sure you get the no regrets experience. And then having bought 3 of them, I feel very comfortable telling you about Hyundai. Why did I buy 3 Hyundais already? 1, because the Santa Fe's, to me, were the safest, best price point, best bells and whistles I could find for both my kids when they started driving, and they were 16, so they were bad drivers. They're hopefully better now. I'm driving the current 2025 Santa Fe, which is brand new body style, looks fabulous, drives really, really well. Really nice car. Had the Palisade earlier and absolutely loved it. Also, we've got the Ioniq 5, which is the electric car that's won every award imaginable. So check all those out at Murdoch Hyundai. Plus, over at Murdoch Hyundai in Murray and in Logan and Linden, I want to give you the VIP treatment because you're a Locked On Jazz listener. So email me first at dlock09@gmail.com before you stop by so that we can get you the VIP treatment, have it someone waiting for you, take care of you, take away all the hassle. It's over at Murdoch Hyundai in Linden and in Logan and also at 4646 South State Street. Email me at dlock09@gmail.com. From upsets to game-winning drives to the NFL playoffs, it's all here. And what makes it better? FanDuel.com. That's right, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 guaranteed in bonus bets. That's right, $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything you need for live bets, same game parlays, and much more. Right now, NFL lines are out for the playoffs this weekend. While the Lions sit by the wayside enjoying it, the Chargers are a 2.5-point favorite on the road at Houston. The Ravens a 9.5-point favorite over the Steelers. Broncos are an 8.5-point dog in Buffalo. Eagles are a 4.5-point favorite at home. Tampa Bay a 3-point favorite over the Commanders. And the Vikings are just a 1.5-point favorite over the red-hot Rams out there. The NBA line tonight for the Jazz and the Hawks. The Jazz have yet to be favored all year, and they are a 6.5-point underdog tonight to the Atlanta Hawks with a pretty healthy list of players missing for the Jazz. So go right now to FanDuel.com. Get in on the action. Get $200 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make the playoff seasons unforgettable with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are breaking down the trade possibilities, and we've looked at who's available. So take a second and ask yourself, if you're an opposing team and you could get a guard, would you want Levine, Fox, CJ McCollum, Anthony Simons, Malcolm Brogdon, Bruce Brown, Collin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson? Which would be your first priority? If you wanted to wing, would it be Jimmy Butler, Brandon Ingram, John Collins, Jeremy Grant, Cam Johnson, Kyle Kuzma? And then how do you fit those guards? Because some of those guards, Anthony Simons, Collin Sexton, Jordan Clarkson, Bruce Brown, really aren't point guards. Zach LaVine. So they're all very similar. And if you have a center, Ayton, Collins, Vucevic, Nurkic, Valanciunas, Kelly Olynyk, who are you interested in? Again, John's not really a center. So, who's out there? Let's start in the West. Oklahoma City could do something. To do it the way, remember, in most of these cases, you're going to have to match salary. There are some teams that have some cap space, can take some players in, but there's not a lot, right? Like teams with available NBA cap space right now are limited, and there aren't a lot of, moreover, they aren't that much deal. So right now, teams with cap space are the Detroit Pistons have $14 million of cap space. That's kind of it. So Detroit's the one team that could make a trade into space. We're $3 million last time I checked under. I guess we could probably do something, but it wouldn't give us enough cap space to make a deal. They've narrowed that. This collective bargaining agreement is narrowed. You have to have a minimum salary, and you have to have a top, and there's the top, and so it's narrowed the amount of teams that are going to do that. So we start with Oklahoma City. In Oklahoma City, you'd have to have contracts that match deals because everyone's on the cap. Oklahoma City doesn't really have tradable contracts they want to get rid of unless they're willing to move Aaron Wiggins. So they just signed to a decreasing 4-year deal that's at $10 million now and $7 million. It's exactly the deal they wanted out of him. They had Kendrick Williams at $6 or $7 million. Their most usable players, Osam Jang, who's making $6 million. But even if you were to put together Wiggins and Osam Jang together, you're at $16 million. Well, none of the players we just talked about have $16 million. Collin's at 17. I also just don't see Collin going to Oklahoma City. So take Oklahoma City off the map. Houston's a little interesting. Houston has a bunch of $8 million contracts they could move to try to put together a deal. They have Jeff Green at 18. They have Jake Landell at 8. Excuse me, Jeff Green at 8. Jake Landell at 8. They have Deshaun Tate at 8. And they have Aaron Holiday at 4.7. And they have young Cam Whitmore at 3.5, who they might be willing to move because they just have so many young players. And he may just not be a part of what they're doing. Now, on the other end, and Memphis has 3 tradable contracts. Brendan Clark at 12.5, Luke Kennard at 9.5, and John Conchor at $6 million. Now, again, Luke Kennard played 24 minutes last night. Brendan Clark played 15 minutes last night. And John Conchor played 23 minutes, had 13 rebounds. Now, Desmond Bane didn't play, and John Morant didn't play. But again, someone better explain to me why Memphis is moving John Conchar with a $6 million deal. Luke Kennard's the most talked about. $9 million deal for a dead-eye shooter is pretty good. But Memphis could put together something to get to 18 for Sexton. They're going to struggle unless they move all of those guys to get to John Collins' 26. Houston's going to struggle to get to John Collins' 26. So far, yeah, you could probably find a deal in the West for Houston and Memphis for Collin Sexton if you think they want Collin Sexton. And you have to again decide whether the Jazz are willing do something. I have a hard time with either of those two teams coming up with enough money to get to 26.5 for John Collins. And Clarkson at 14, obviously, they could probably figure it out. Denver just doesn't have the contracts to trade. Denver's going to have to get in something big with Michael Porter Jr. But they have Dario Saric at $5 million, and they have Zeke Naji at $9 million, and that's it. So take them off the list. And this is where the new collective bargaining agreement starts to eliminate teams. The Lakers have 3 tradable deals without giving up players. But one of them is Jared Vanderbilt at $10 million with 3 years left on that deal. I don't think there's a lot of people that are going to want to go make a deal for Jared Vanderbilt with $10 million left on the deal. Jalen Hood-Schifino at 3.8, Christian Wood at $3 million, and Cam Reddish at $2 million. You piece all of those together, you might get to the 18 for Collin Sexton. I would take the Lakers out. They just don't have the pieces. Everyone's going to talk Laker trades because that gets clickbait, but they literally, Jared Vanderbilt but has 3 years left on his deal. So we got Oklahoma City out. We got Denver out. We got the Lakers out. Let's get to Dallas. Maxi Kleber's making 11. Dwight Powell's making 4. Dante Exum's making 3. Without giving up a major piece of their rotation, and Maxi Kleber has been forced to play 22 minutes a night right now, John Collins could really help them. He's kind of similar to P.J. Washington, gives them some depth, maybe. They might be willing to move Grimes, who in the offseason could be another contract because they have to probably pay him. But they can't get up to 26.5. They literally don't have the contracts to get to 26.5. If they traded Maxi Kleber, Dwight Powell, and Dante Exum, they could get to Collin Sexton's 18. It's really hard for these teams to get there. I would generally say take Dallas out. So we're in 5 teams, and Oklahoma City doesn't need it. Houston could probably put something together for Collin Sexton. Memphis might be able to put something together for Collin Sexton if they decide that's what they needed. Denver, I'm saying no. Lakers, I'm saying no. Dallas, I'm saying no. They can't even do it. We'll continue. I'm telling you, I cannot figure out where and how Justin Zanuck and Danny Ainge are going to be able to get something done in this deadline. The landscape is not favoring trades. Next on Locked On Jazz. Today's show is brought to you part by our friends over at Prize Picks. It's a great way to get involved in the game, have a great time. Basketball season is heating up, and there's no better way with all the action every single night to get into the real money with Prize Picks. Whether you're a diehard fan or just love some friendly competition, Prize Picks makes it fun and easy to turn your basketball knowledge into cash. Pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to $1,000 of your cash. Think LeBron James going to drop 30 with Kyrie and Luka out, who in Dallas does things. Prize Picks lets you make your predictions, put your money where your mouth is in just 60 seconds. You can use Prize Picks to get whether Anthony Edwards will keep going off with a finish last night, Jason Tatum. Plus, with Flex Play, even if one of your picks doesn't hit, you can still double your money. Plus, once you hit, you get your money fast, sometimes as fast as 15 minutes. It's honestly the best way to keep the game exciting. Now's the perfect time to join. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use the code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly when you play your first $5 lineup. That's right. No need to win to get the bonus. It's guaranteed. Prize Picks. Run your game. Thanks very much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. I do greatly appreciate it. Love having you aboard. All right. So we've run through the beginning of this landscape. Let's get to the Clippers. Clippers might need some help. They have a hard time scoring. They have PJ Tucker at $11 million. They have Nicholas Batum at $5 million. So we're at 16. And then they have Chris Dunn at 5, but plus 2 more years. Derek Jones at 9 plus 2 more years. Terrence Mann at 11 plus 3 more years. Maybe the Clippers They can't get to John Collins' 26.5, though. They might be able to get to Collin Sexton's 18 barely. Jazz would have to release a bunch of players for players they don't want. Makes it hard. Seems unlikely. Warriors. Warriors need to do something, and the Warriors are having a hard time scoring. But this one gets interesting again. They have Gary Payton at 9. And then they have 3 players who they could trade, all of which they've just signed longer deals. And you have to decide whether you want their money. So, Buddy Hield only makes $9 million. You can move him, but he's got 3 years plus a player option on the back end of it. Kyle Anderson makes $9 million. He's got 2 years and a player option. Moses Moody is a little complicated to trade because he jumps from 5 to 11 million to 12 million to 13 million, but he has 3 more years. Obviously, Jonathan Kuminga is their big piece at 7 million, but I don't think they're trading Jonathan Kuminga in a Collin Sexton, John Collins deal unless we're giving them a bunch of money, and they have Kayvon Looney at 8 million. So they can put Gary Payton at 9 and Kayvon Looney together and get to Collin Sexton at 18. I don't know how they can get to John Collins. It's a reoccurring theme here. Getting to 26.5 without one of the main pieces is hard. It also means, by the way, go back to all the players we talked about that were available. Getting Zach LaVine's 43, getting to CJ McCollum's 33, getting to Simon's 26, getting to Brogdon's 23 and Brown's 23 is going to be hard for teams. Getting to Jimmy Butler's 48, Brandon Ingram's 36, John Collins is 27, Jeremy Grant's 25, Cam Johnson's 23, Kyle Kuzma's 23 is going to be hard for teams. And there aren't that many teams that can do it. So the minute one of these teams makes a deal for one of those players and takes 2 or 3 players and puts them together and gets that, it's one of the very few teams that could actually make such a deal and they go off the market. And that's the primary reason why I think the Jazz getting some sort of deal done is going to be really, really difficult. Timberwolves are wildly interesting. Timberwolves don't have a lot of small deals. Joe Ingles' name is being floated around there. He's at $2 million. Like they should trade Joe Ingles back to us for Steve Mihailuk and let us have Joe Ingles hang out with us. Because Joe's not playing. And Svi could just be a good bench player and they need scoring. Those kind of deals could all happen. Right? Somebody for Drew Eubanks, $5 million. Like those deals could happen. But they have $33 million in Julius Randle. So they can suddenly do something. But they don't have a contract bigger than $2 million unless they do something like Dante DiVincenzo, Mike Conley, or Rob Dillingham, or Nickeil Alexander-Walker, to put together with Julius Randle to make numbers work. The wild card here is Jaden McDaniels, who's pretty good. They signed to a 5-year contract at $23 million this year, 4 more years on it. For the right player, I wonder if they would move that. But for John Collins, Collin Sexton, nothing there that'd be done. The Spurs, I think, are in for it for a big deal. I don't think they're looking to do a John Collins, Collin Sexton, and prove us down the home stretch. They have Harrison Barnes at $18 million. They have Zach Collins at $16 million. They can go get to 34. And they have Devin Vassell and Keldon Johnson of players they're probably willing to trade to get a better player. They have a lot of pieces. It's why they're being mentioned for De'Aaron Fox or one of these other players. And I think they're looking for that kind of piece. They're not looking for a Collin Sexton, John Collins type piece. They could put together possibly, though honestly, them getting to John Collins at 26.5 is really complicated. And John Collins would help them. But they would have to try to put together Harrison Barnes, Zach Collins combination. to get to 34, and then the Jazz would have to figure out how to get up to 8 more off the 26 because they don't have enough money to get from Harrison Barnes or Zach Collins' 16 or 18 to get to John Collins' 27, 26.5. And then the last piece is Sacramento in the West. And they have Trey Lyles at 8. Kevin Huerter, they're probably willing to trade, who I kind of still think is a good player. But they're trading that to get a piece. Kevin Huerter's at 16. Again, yeah, they could do Trey Lyles and Kevin Huerter for John Collins. I don't know why they would do that. But there's a combination for John Collins. But we're probably giving up a pick to get Kevin Huerter in that deal. We're not getting something. We're deciding Kevin Huerter's worth a pick. De'Aaron Fox is sitting at 34. That's the big question. Spurs do seem to line up better than anyone else for that. Okay, we go to the East. Cleveland's out. Boston's out. New York's out. New York has a $6 million deal and Precious Achiuwa and like a bunch of $2 million deals. Unless they do something crazy. But they're pretty good, and I don't think they're trading any of those other guys. Jericho Sims for $2 million. The Orlando Magic could use some offense. The Orlando Magic could really use a Collin Sexton. They could put that together with Cole Anthony and Gary Harris, and you have a Collin Sexton deal done, I think, or close to it. We'd have to take Cole Anthony for another $13 million next year. We'd have a club option on the year after that. Gary Harris is a club option for $7 million. We would probably want some sort of pick. Okay, there it is. There's like the deal that I think actually helps both teams. We would need some sort of pick from Orlando for that, hopefully a late first-round pick. And there's your scenario. And Milwaukee's got Pat Connaughton to trade and almost no other salary, unless they're going to trade Bobby Portis. But they're not trading Bobby Portis for John Collins because Bobby Portis is probably better. It's bigger. So there we sit. We just did this whole exercise, 32 minutes of a show, and I came up with one deal. Cole Anthony, Gary Harris for Collin Sexton if we get a pick. I actually think a better deal for us is that we send John Collins. I don't even actually know if this totally works, but I think it does. That we said, here's the deal, like literally, if we're trying to shed deals, shed contracts, shed players, what about trading Collin Sexton? I'm making this up. And John Collins for Jimmy Butler. And we get a protected first, or we just get a bunch of seconds. And then we sit on Jimmy Butler for the rest of the year. And then we trade Jimmy Butler in the offseason in a sign and trade, and we get a trade exception out of it. Honestly, not so sexy, but and silly, but maybe the best thing that's out there. This is going to be a very hard trade market for the Utah Jazz to be able to get a lot of value for their players as we move forward. It is the new collective bargaining agreement has limited the players. There are a lot of players available, and there aren't many players to be moved. It's not a great combination. That's today's Locked On Jazz. Now we send you over on, thank you very much for tuning in. By the way, follow me at DLock09 on all socials, X, Blue Thread, Threads, or Blue Sky Threads, Snap, Insta, TikTok. Follow me on all of them. Plus, subscribe to the daily newsletter, Locked On Daily. It's the #1 stop for all news, anything NBA fan. Subscribe. It's free. Go to Locked On Daily right now. Sign up for Locked On Jazz, and please follow and subscribe to this program. We now send you the first ever national 24/7 channel on YouTube, Locked On NBA. Check out Locked On NBA, the podcast with Game Night every night after all the games.